Today we're talking about going back to the 90s for an effective strategy to reach students today. Are you ready? Because it's time.
Holy nuclear time bombs! Holy overeating! Holy roller coasters!
It's time!
It's time.
It's time for the YM Sidekick Podcast!
Hello, heroes. This is Tom Pounder, and you are listening to the YM Sidekick Podcast. This is the podcast where ministers come to learn some cool tips and tricks and ideas on how to do ministry more effectively in this very digital and online world, this very phygital world that we're living in today. And today we're going to go back to the 90s. Well, not literally. Obviously, we can't go back to the 90s. But I brought in my friend Ben Kerns, my California friend and my fellow Gen Xer, back on the podcast to talk about doing student ministry effectively. And we're using tools and tips that we learned back in the 90s to minister effectively to students today. Obviously, we've got the coronavirus going on, and there's lots of cool digital and online tools that you can do to reach students. But the reality is students aren't always connected online right now. They are overwhelmed online. There's too much online right now. So how can you reach students today? Ben's got some great ideas as his team is working through some different things out in California, and I'm really excited to share with you that, as it may be some of the things that you're currently doing, but it may be some new things or some refreshers that you're looking for to help reach students. So we're going to talk about how you can go back to the 90s in theory to help minister to students today in actuality. So without any further ado, let's get into the conversation right now, talking to Ben Kerns. All right, with me right now is the one and only Benjamin Kerns.
Woo! Let's go.
I wish they could see you and do what you did, because that's such a Gen Xer type of thing, you know.
Well, we're getting old. I love it, but we're wise beyond our years, especially still touching youth ministry.
Yeah, well, and this, you were doing the Randy Macho Man Savage woo kind of thing. It's kind of, that's old school, man. That's good.
It is old school.
Did you watch wrestling growing up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Roddy Piper, he was my man.
Yeah. Do you remember that movie that Roddy Piper did with the aliens?
No.
He did a movie, and it was like the best line of it was something like he's like, I've come here to kick butt, or the other word, kick butt, and chew some bubble gum. And he's like, and right now I'm all out of bubble gum. So it was like he was going to kick butt. And so
I love it.
He was like,
all your millennial youth workers are like, what is going on? Listen,
yeah, because
just imagine it's a TikTok.
Yes. Wait, are you on TikTok? You have to be on TikTok, right?
I was on TikTok, and I lost about 12 hours of my life.
Yeah.
And I realized I learned things I never wanted to learn.
Yep.
And so I understand it, but now I'm out.
I actually was surprised on how much I actually learned from some of the, there were some iPhone hacks and this kind of hack. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. But you're right. You can get sucked into it very easily. And,
at our age, we have like all the TikTok moms. Like they just get thrown on the For You page. I'm like, I can't be staring at the TikTok moms all day,
And it's weird when you see the TikTok moms and they're in your neighborhood and you're like, I know that lady. And that's kind of interesting. Okay, stop. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we could talk about TikTok. We could talk about, 80s and Gen X stuff, which we would love to do. But we're going to talk about youth ministry. But before we do that, you haven't been on the podcast in a while. So just refresh everyone. Who are you? Where do you live? And did you get COVID yet?
Yeah. My name is Ben Kerns. I'm a lead pastor out in Marin County, California, just north of San Francisco. I've done youth ministry for over 25 years, and they let me have the keys to the castle. And so now I get to supervise a great team of people doing youth ministry. And I haven't been on the podcast. I haven't even been on the internet for a while with the whole COVID mayhem. I don't have any. We've locked down like crazy, but I really struggled with my social media world. As a middle-aged white guy, there's just not a lot to say with all the chaos that's happening in the world. And so trying to keep my head down and try to figure out what God's doing in our church and help our team accomplish it. So
yeah,
this is my first foray into podcasting in a long time.
Yes, well, I'm so happy that you are podcasting with me, because you're always one of my favorite guests. Because God knows what you're going to say during my podcast. That's the one thing. And then two is you got a ton of great insights, and I love what you're doing. Tell me again, what's your area in California? What's the COVID situation like right now?
So we live in Marin, and Marin is the bluest county in the bluest state. They love the federal government. They love Gavin Newsom. If Gavin Newsom would tell them how to wipe their butt, they would be like, "Thank you so much. I love that." So he's like, "Lock it down." They're gladly locking it down. It doesn't impact us because there's some wealth in our area. So it's too bad for everyone in Central California. But for us, we feel noble. And they're all white collar workers. So they're all living at home, living in this panic, even though there's hardly any COVID. We'll probably be the last county in America that opens up. So
Wow.
we're not allowed to be indoors for church, indoors for meals. And as a libertarian who leans conservative, it hurts my inner life, but I'm called to be a pastor, not a politician. So whatever.
And this is why I love having you on the podcast, because God knows what you're going to say on my when you when you speak. This is great. Okay, talk to me about real quick the wildfires. When this airs, hopefully the wildfires will be gone. But have you ever encountered that? You've lived in California your whole entire life, right?
Yep. There's always been a few fires, usually down in LA. A few years ago, there was this crazy fire that went through my area, and it wiped out like half of Santa Rosa, not half, but it wiped out a whole neighborhood. And there was a couple of those that just were really devastating. And so everyone's kind of been on fire alert the last couple of years, but this is this unique. There's so many of them. It is so smoky outside.
Wow.
I mean, I can't even see the mountains, that are 5 miles away. Yeah, it's a bummer. And for me as a snotty Marin person, I'm like, I can't go outside and I can't go for a run. But I mean, all those fires, equal homes burning and first responders struggling and all the devastation. So it is a little brutal for sure.
Yeah. Damn. I'm yeah. Times I get tempted to move out to California would only be because of you, but the reason why I don't go out to California is because the wildfires and the earthquakes, they just scare the crud out of me. So I just
There's no earthquakes. California is beautiful, but it's the worst place to live, worst place to do ministry. I keep wanting God to call me to Idaho. I pitch it to my kids. And I said, listen, we could cash out of our house and get a little house on a lake and become like a boat family and like be wake surfers. And at the time, my son had a crush on someone and couldn't imagine leaving. And I wasn't quite ready to leave my job. But I fantasize about leaving California all the time. But I think I'm called here forever.
well, that's good. Well, they need people like you there. Okay, so let's talk about youth ministry. Let's talk about what your team did. You just had a fall kickoff.
Well, actually, our fall kickoff's this week. So by the
Oh,
time it's aired, we'll have just started. Yeah, but we're doing all the prep for it.
okay, so what are you guys doing to minister to your students, especially since, with all these restrictions going on?
Well, so our team has just kicked ass for this whole thing. You're not allowed to say ass on your podcast?
No, you can. I just love it because
As you don't add hole to it, right? You were okay.
you're just the only one who really cusses on my podcast again, which is one of the reasons why I love having you on. So
For the record, ass isn't even registered in a PG-13 movie. Like that's still PG status. So anyway, they do. They're crushing it. And in fact, when this thing first happened, they went straight to Zoom youth groups. Straight using all the things that Zoom can do with breakout rooms
yeah,
and they just did it day one, crushed it. And then once summer came around, they went straight to outdoor youth groups. So we have like an exemption, like outdoor religious services. And so we kind of use an outdoor religious service exemption as kind of how we classify youth ministry. And they spent all summer doing that. And at first I was like, are they doing enough? Are we doing enough? And I realized, like I was talking to another lead pastor and he's like, yeah, next week we're doing our first outdoor youth group. I'm like, what the hell has your guy been doing for the last 6 months? Like they're just now starting to do this. And I think what it is as Gen Xers, we value authenticity, we value interaction, we value relationship. And I've watched a lot of younger youth workers think that presenting content over Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, like just pushing content no kid wants content pushed to them. They already got all the content they need, and there's no way we can, you know, compete with all the TikTok moms. That's who would compete with me, but whatever they're competing with. And so I just think everyone thought, oh, this is their chance to be internet famous and push. But because our guys work with me and I so value relationship, and they do too, we just went for relationship and as much interaction as possible. And so that's what we did up to fall kickoff, and now we're getting ready to start again.
So what kind of stuff did you do for relationships to kind of foster that? Did you encounter a lot of parents saying, I still can't go outside, like we really don't want that? So what did you do to foster that kind of relationship stuff?
So it is really hard because of where we live. You know, people have sun allergies and peanut allergies and gluten allergies and, you know, freshman allergies. I mean, we have the most high maintenance moms on the planet. And so we just kind of had this posture of, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we recognize it's not going to work for everybody. And so made it a really non-shame based way. It's not like this is the place God shows up. No, here's all the places God shows up. And if you don't feel safe, we understand. But and then here's all the protocols that we are doing. So we would so when you came, you had to check in on an iPad. You had to get your temperature checked. All the volunteers had gloves. We all had masks. And each small group kind of sat in a circle, 6 feet apart. And then there was like these little pods of people all over the lawn. And then they would do, a little bit of a mixer. And then they would move to this other area where there'd be a little bit of worship and speaking. And then they break into small groups again. So they did. So the youth group, classic Gen X 1990s youth ministry, that's what they did, just with some social distancing. And the truth is, because the kids are so locked down, the fact that it's not a compelling youth ministry, but compared to sitting at home, it really is compelling.
Well, I agree with you on that because so we've been doing some outside stuff, and the idea is really just social and community building. We're not doing anything real programmatic, and some of the people, some of our leaders, that stresses them out. They're like, "What's going to be the reason why they come? We have to do something big and wow." I'm like, "No, we don't. We're giving them an opportunity to come outside and hang out and have real face-to-face connections with people. I'm not going to spend $300 on this inflatable thing that I have to wipe down every single time we're
Right.
going to get people together." And we've actually experienced some really good interactions. Now, it's not the same as it was before, but the expectation is not the same either. I just want to get kids together. And so feeling like that's a good opportunity. And you felt like your group, you've had good response to it. Students are responding well. Parents are responding well to it.
Yeah. And in fact, our youth ministry, it dipped. But once we reestablished, it's actually grown. So it's grown like with new kids, like who have never been to our church or youth group before. And part of it was, it's the actual thing that happens at youth ministry. A lot of really great communication with parents regularly every week. And then there's always a giveaway. And so after youth group the next day, our youth staff team would end up going to different people's homes and like bringing them Chick-fil-A or In-N-Out Burger or donuts, depending on the prizes. And so there's lots of like just showing up in people's doorways and loving them. And so the accumulation of that, just doing those little things, but week in and week out, has kind of kept all the connectors going. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, and so I was gonna say, I think what you might have experienced too, we were talking about before, is there's all the stress of feeling like the rules are always changing. And so what can we do? What can we not do? When are we coming back? And what I found is we were treading water this whole time, waiting for us to come back to normal, as well as trying to innovate the whole time to keep kids coming. And those two things in tandem were actually exhausting. Not so much the work part of it, but just internally and emotionally, it was just so exhausting to try to wait for this new thing and then keep things humming along too. And so what we did is we about a month and a half ago decided we're not coming back until January at least, maybe the whole year. And so let's plan like we're never coming back. So how are we going to do our fall retreat? How are we going to do our outreach event? How are we going to do actual youth group? And when you think of it like, hey, we're never coming back, all of a sudden your creative juices start flowing, and you don't need to put contingency plans because that's now the plan.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all pretty pumped for this next week and to hit play on it all.
Okay, so what are some of the things you're looking forward to now that you've said, "Hey, we're doing this for the next few months. This is our plan." What happens? Like, let me throw this out. What happens when it starts getting colder up there? And you're meeting outside. Like, what have you thought through about that? Because that's a question I'm actually thinking, because we are meeting outside, and we think we've got until about October before it starts getting a little uncomfortable being outside.
Yep. So we've just decided we're going to be outside till probably daylight savings time. Once daylight savings time hits, we're going to go back to Zoom.
Okay.
And if restrictions lift, then we'll do a thing where people will meet at their small group leader's house. And so each small group there'll still be a Zoom youth group. So there could be a common teaching and some music, but the bulk of the youth group will be like a mini Young Life with the small group person at their house.
Yeah.
Um, if the restrictions lift, and if they don't lift, then they just go back to Zoom and leverage some different tricks that they've learned the first iteration of it.
What I love about what you're doing, Ben, is it's almost like we're going back to the 90s and really focusing on relational ministry. I think, like you again, we get so tied up in like, it's got to be this. We've got to be on TikTok and producing this content. We got to be on YouTube. And truthfully, I have used this time to go and to explore those in our student ministry. But I also know that it really is about the relationships, because again, kids can flip through some TikTok and everything like that, but they're not really paying attention. They're not really. So no matter what you put on TikTok, it's going to get some views, but that's about it. Where you're going to make the impact is those relationships. So being creative with, okay, we're going to meet outside. Oh, I'm going to take this person some donuts. I'm going to stop over at their house. I think you finding creative ways to enhance relationships really will strengthen your ministry. It seems like it's strengthening your ministry rather than putting it behind the eight ball because you're not on YouTube.
Right. And what's rad is because all the other youth ministries in our area are all led by, millennials, who are crushing their Instagram game.
Yeah.
We're the only ministry in our area that's showing up at people's houses, that's all meeting outside an ice cream parlor and buying everybody ice cream. And I mean, giving away pizzas, good old classic, stuff. And it's really working. And especially since our kids, they have all the content they could ever need. I mean, my son's watched everything there is to watch on Netflix, even probably 365,
Yeah.
But the one thing but they don't have is actually human interaction, and they're too immature to pull that off. So you have a youth leader who's an adult who knows how to pull that off, and they get to participate and have human interaction and have some sort of adventure or something.
Yeah.
Even if it's just going to an ice cream parlor, which is totally like out of the norm. So how great is that?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I've taken more kids out to lunch during this time than I was in the year before this, because I was too busy doing other things. Now, kids are totally freed up. They're even when we go back to school. Have you guys started school yet?
Yeah, they just started last week.
Okay, they just started last week. So our kids still go back to school in another week or two. But like, even when they go back to school, I'm going to have opportunities to do things with them because they don't have extracurricular activities. At least in the fall, we don't. Do you guys have extracurricular? No.
No, nothing.
So it's really fascinating, this new opportunity we have, which is just to invest in relationships and really dig deep into that and really allow them to think outside the box. Are your leaders doing anything else relational wise that you were really impressed with or really seen flourish?
Nothing that I'm impressed with, but our leaders are, they're normal volunteers who have businesses and stresses and families. And so we just try to say, hey man, like once a quarter, do something with your small group.
Yeah.
And we have a couple leaders who crush, and the bare minimum do once a quarter.
Yeah.
But it's usually our paid or intern people who are really carrying the weight of that kind of stuff. And that's just our cultural context. And in younger communities, especially who have like a near a college campus and they have a lot of college staff, that kind of stuff crushes. But in our context, it's okay.
Yeah. No, that's
But
good.
they are adults in their life who love them and leverage their small group, but they don't have a lot of extra space or time,
Yeah.
or make it anyway.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, this is really encouraging. And again, I think it's all about just the relationships and making sure that you're connecting with people in real and relevant ways. So I think that's great.
Well, and one thing that, in my evaluation, my job appraisal this year that I really took to heart, besides, scoring tens on everything, of course, was, we were really compelled to try to be a little more innovative and not be so scared of failure. And so it's been fun to help lead our team and say, like, try everything. Everything's an experiment. So it's not like, hey, we did this thing and it's a failure, or if no kids came, or it was a bust, or like everything's a learning opportunity. And I think our team really has embraced that they cannot fail. Like unless they touch a kid, outside of that, they cannot fail. And that freedom has allowed them to be even more innovative and I think a little more hope filled too.
I'm glad you said that actually, because I was talking to someone else this the other day, and I completely agree with you. If we're not trying new things right now, then when would you ever try something new? This is the perfect opportunity for you to experiment because my bosses are just saying, we just want you to do stuff. We want you out there doing things. We don't care what it is, but we want to see you trying stuff because we've never had to deal with this kind of stuff before, you know?
Well,
So,
and especially youth ministry, the stuff that works in youth ministry ends up getting to be used by the larger church, and there's a much bigger bandwidth and for failure and acceptance for failure. And so, everything that our church is doing on Zoom, we learn from our student ministry, and so I think even more so, student ministry should have a wider latitude to try new stuff.
yeah, no, I agree. It's fantastic. Good stuff, man. Well, that's very encouraging and reassuring.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, as we're wrapping up, one thing that's unique about this time is everyone's finding new ways to connect and be friends and fall in love. Our students are all falling in love. And I know whether they're leaders or adult leaders or pastors, that online dating machine is just an incredible deal. And we're finding authenticity in all sorts of new ways.
Yep.
So gotta help our kids do that well.
Yep, man, I completely agree with you. I think we have to find different ways. There's lots of we'll talk about online really connections and relationships the next time we get on the podcast together. But we'll do that. Well, okay. So Ben, you're awesome. You're great. How can people connect with you? And since you're on social media, you got to give out your social media handles now.
So I'm back on social media. I write a blog at benjaminkerns.online. And my Twitter and Instagram handle are the real Ben Kerns. I moved from average youth ministry because turns out no one wanted to be average. I thought it was a great idea, but I transitioned to the real Ben Kerns so that when I get to be rich and famous, I'll have that moniker. But until then, it's just kind of douchey. But
I,
that's how to
I
do it.
I think the Twitter handles with the real in front of their names is the best Twitter. I wish I could change mine, but I'm still tied into my TA Pounder one. Wait, let me ask you this. So are you not blogging? Or are you not having anybody blog on the averageyouthministry.com anymore?
I'm trying to get some younger voices to write on it.
Yeah.
So if anyone in your world wants to write it, I have this great platform with tons of subscribers and it has a good reach. And so anyone who wants to try their hand on writing on a blog, I'd love to share that with them. There's a couple people that are kind of slowly working on it, but I'm more facilitating that blog than writing on it.
Well, it's a great guest post opportunity actually, because and no lie, I mean, Ben, when they do those youth ministry best of lists, the best of sites, Ben's always in the top 25. I mean, so he's gotten a tremendous reach. So if you're looking at exploring some content creation, send it over to Ben. I'll include his information and just submit an article to him. And who knows, maybe you'll get it.
Maybe you will.
maybe you'll be lucky enough to post on the average youth ministry. I mean, listen, my iterations, they never, I can never get as high as Ben on. So, all right, Ben. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
Look forward to it again. Bye, guys.
All right, so there you go. My conversation with Ben. It's always great having him on. Again, I love all the guests that I have on the podcast, but some of these reoccurring guests like Ben and the people that I've had some really good, genuine friendships with over the years it's been awesome talking to those guys and getting their insights. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from going back. Young Life had a book back in the day called Back to the Basics. It talked about just going back to the basics of student ministry. Sometimes we need to go back in order to move forward in our strategy. And so, what I loved about what Ben said is it's not very high tech stuff. As much as I love technology, it's all about the relationships, all about the connections. And so, I love that. We need a refresher. We need to not lose sight of it. It's all about the relationships and those connections. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What stood out to you from the interview? What encouraged you? What challenged you? What made you think a little bit more? Let's definitely carry this conversation online a little bit more. So just definitely hit me up on Twitter at TA Pounder. I would love to talk to you more. And again, I'm serious. If you've got a blog and you want to try your hand in blogging, submit an article to Ben. I've got all that contact information in the show notes today, so you can definitely do that. All right, heroes. Well, thanks so much for joining me. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, go to iTunes or Spotify to subscribe to it, or go to ymsidekick.com. There, I've got all my content there: blogs, vlogs, podcasts, ebooks, and information about the digital bootcamp. I love the digital bootcamp because we're adding people to it all the time. It's for all ministers who want to learn digital tools to help expand your reach and reach more people for Christ. So if you want to get all that information, go to ymsidekick.com. And if you got any questions about it, honestly, just hit me up on email to tom@ymsidekick.com. All right, heroes. Well, I hope you have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week. And until next time, have a great one.